Welcome back to another episode of Auction Talk with Steffes Group on the Mighty 790 and 104.7 KFGO. I'm Rusty Halverson, and in the studio we've got Max Steffes. Good morning, Max. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Rusty. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, and you've got a special guest, a familiar guest in the studio with you today. Who'd you bring?
By God, I've been living in his shadows all my life. We've been doing this now, 2 years, Rusty, and I haven't had him in yet. We had some exciting news to share, and I figured, what the heck? We'd get Dad in here. So Scott Steffes is here.
Mouth.
Wow. Didn't know anything about the shadow, but whatever.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, Scott. We appreciate it.
I have to tell you a story because that's exactly what I used to think when my dad was around.
Yeah. In fact, that was our very first show was with
Grandpa Bob. Yeah, that's right. We had Grandpa Bob on. We've had Brad on. We've had Chris. Yeah, the whole company's been on except for you, Dad. So
you've been hard to nail down. We got you finally, though.
Good thing we negotiated the proper price.
Well, let's talk about something news for Steffes Group, things north of the border. Max, you want to kind of tease what's going on? And Scott, you can fill in some of the blanks for us?
Yeah, so last Thursday we officially made it official that we're purchasing Bruce Shapansky Auctioneering in Canada, and we're going to be entering that marketplace as an auction company in Canada. So we're excited about that. That was public as of, was it Friday?
Friday morning. So Tisdale, Saskatchewan, Canada is where we're going. And for you geographers, you don't want to look it up. We're about 2 hours east of Saskatoon. We're about 80 miles west of the little town called Hudson Bay, which you're for Canadian. That means the bush.
The bush.
The bush. And then we're about 5 hours north of Williston.
Okay.
So that's kind of where Tisdale is. And Bruce Shapansky was a family-run auction business. It was like going to Old Home Week up there. Bruce and his wife and the family members kind of like what Steffes used to be, say, 10, 15 years ago when you have so many people running around.
Really?
Yeah.
So you went up to visit with them. Have you had them here in the States, too, to see how you do business?
Yeah, Bruce and Deb and Courtney and Corey and the son and daughter, they were all down here and got to see Fargo. Boy, they were impressed with Fargo, so congratulations, Fargo.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. So how did it come together? What attracted you to the opportunity?
Well, kind of similar markets, don't you think, Max?
Yeah, the equipment up there is really similar to what we see in the valley.
Bigger.
Bigger yet, believe it or not. But we've done business with a lot of Canadians from a buyer's perspective, and we've always viewed the border as a major hurdle, as a major roadblock. But it's all about the people, as we always say. And if I remember correctly, we approached Bruce through one of our connections, Chris Gellner, actually. Connected the dots, so to speak, and then the conversations just started happening, and it became a natural opportunity that we looked at and pursued, and here we are.
Yeah, Bruce called us. And, name and reputation in the auction business is about the only thing that means anything, except for in today's world, the website's kind of important.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, but so...
SteffesGroup.com, by the way.
Yeah. So Bruce, he's a little older than I am, and for what's next kind of perspective, he kind of sees the writing on the wall. He's very successful, kind of a visionary guy, and he chose as a family and a company not to engage in the technology side, of which we have invested heavily in.
Yes.
From a transition perspective, and he also, as far as his clients and customers are concerned, they were used to coming down here and buying a few pieces of machinery from us, and kind of just seemed to make a good fit. And then there really wasn't anything else in Canada from a transition perspective that was attractive to him. So, hey, just everything happens for a reason.
Yeah. If folks are familiar with Bruce, is he going to stay on in a new role for a while?
Yes, absolutely. We have a saying around Steffes, Max hears it all the time, everybody should do what they do best.
Yeah.
It's kind of simple. But the reality of it is Bruce is still a young man. He wants to engage in the auction business, but mostly on the auction side and not on the business side or the technology side. So it creates another thing that we always talk about, a win-win environment.
Yeah. For starting this new adventure in Canada, was there a lot of hoops to jump through? It's a whole different country. It's got to be a lot different.
Oh, yeah. Hoops. Through the years, as we've talked as a leadership team and stuff, Dad has always really, I don't want to say poo-pooed, but there's some major roadblocks that are associated with crossing that border like we talked about. And I don't know, Dad, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, you had to prove to the Canadian government that you could do a job no Canadian could do, which means never going to Canada.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, if you form a Canadian company and work with all Canadians and stay in Canada like that, it creates a few opportunities. And we just never had the opportunity until now. And also from a scale perspective, it costs a lot. So farmers have gotten bigger, just like everybody else that's driving up and down the field. You know, your farm is a lot bigger than it was 20 years ago, and it's probably going to be a lot bigger 20 years from now. So that's kind of the role we take in the auction business too.
Yeah. And it's all about the people, like we talked about. With Bruce also came a guy by the name of Jason LeBlanc. Mm-hmm. And Jason, come to find out through some social media postings this weekend, is like the Brad Pitt of auctioneers in Canada.
Really?
Like, everybody knows the guy. We did, actually, our video team did, I want to call it a hype video, like a 30-second reel kind of talking about the introduction to Jason LeBlanc being with us now. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, I think he shared it on his Facebook feed, 700 likes and 300 comments and 40,000 views. The guy is famous.
Holy smokes, Rusty. Got more followers than you probably, huh?
Yeah, they've got some competition out there, I tell you
Yeah,
what.
so where is, what's the name of the town? That's
Estevan.
Estevan.
Jason's from Estevan.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's a little closer. So
Yeah.
He's a good auctioneer, too. Hopefully we'll get
Dang
to practice a little more. You know, everything's gone on the internet.
Yeah.
Crazy. You can't even get a hot dog at an auction anymore.
So Jason would be just kind of a hop, skip, and a jump from Williston. Not
He's
too
an
far.
hour and 20 minutes from our yard in Williston.
Okay.
And I got to go across the border, though.
Yep. And, you know, with this this new endeavor, this new adventure, Steffes is a family operation. Bruce had a similar family operation up there,
Exactly. Son and a daughter in the business, and neither of which are auctioneers. They're engaged in the business side of it. Corey kind of runs the yard and the trucking side of it, and Courtney's in the office. And so they're going to stick on with us as long as they want to, or hopefully we can convince them to stay, that kind of thing.
Yeah. In your visits up to Canada, when you're kind of checking it out, having conversations, what'd you see up there for crops? How are guys doing up there?
I mean, Jason, for example, has a little farming operation. You know, he has one field that's 1,600 acres. They don't make many corners.
Wow.
And the canola is still really big, that kind of thing. It depends on where you're at. They got a little dry at the end, and it really affected the canola crop, but at the same time, if you go to Tisdale, Canada, it reminded me a lot of Oaks, North Dakota.
Really?
You know, a lot of still square. It's funny, in Saskatchewan, they still talk about miles and they still talk about acres. Shh, don't tell anybody.
They do?
Yeah, yeah. And they still got to, you know, follow the street signs and all that kind of thing. But, you know, everything's laid out very similar to North Dakota. They don't do as much tiling as they do around here. They haven't got that far yet. And, you know, very little row crop. There's a few areas of soybeans. It's just, you know, just that much farther north, and it gets a little colder there.
Yeah. See any cattle on your?
You know, there's
visits?
not a lot of cattle in the straight north of North Dakota. You got to get closer to the mountains, or like over. There's still Charolais are big.
Yeah.
A lot of white cattle.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but not necessarily in those big farming countries. It's wide open country, big farms, big fields, lots of canola, a lot of Durham wheat, stuff like that.
Okay. Now, it just became public last week, but do you have any goals, anything for the year ahead, next 5 years? Where are you guys kind of thinking?
Try not to screw it up. You know, we want to be successful up there, and we'll see where the opportunities come, but we think there's a lot of equipment that's going to trade hands up there through the next decade or so, and we want to be a part of that. The other thing with Canada, too, from what I've heard from talking to people like Jason and stuff, it's not at all uncommon for a farmer up there to retire from farming 3 or 4 times.
Oh.
So there's much more transitioning that goes on. The other side of the equation is with farm real estate. They don't view land in the same way that we do, probably because there's so much of it. But it's pretty common for a farmer up there to retire and then liquidate his 8,000 acres of land that he owns.
Yeah, and then buy it back 5 years later.
And start up
buy
again.
Different land.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's much more easily, what would you say, traded.
Yeah.
Different.
Yeah.
It's just funny how geography changes everything. I always tell a story about, you know, in Iowa, when we first got into southeast Iowa, and the Richard Realty and Auction, same kind of thing with the Shapansky, totally off subject. Mm-hmm. But Lynn called me up after, hey, I just booked a big auction sale. This guy's got 4 farms. I'm going, 4 farms? Wow. Was it got like a couple sections or half section? He goes, huh? I said, well, how much land is it? Has it got a couple quarters or is, you know, whatever? And he goes, what? He goes, no, he's got 27.63 acres over here, and he's got 18.27 over there, and he's got 12.2 over here, and that's a farm in Iowa. It's funny.
Yeah.
And in Saskatchewan, especially northern Saskatchewan, man, if you're not farming mile-long rounds, boy, you're not making any money.
Along with a new adventure in Canada, Steffes Group is also dipping your toes into finance, I understand, too. How did that come about?
Funny thing about money, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. In today's world, with interest rates changing and things of that nature, capital has always been foundational to being successful in the farming business. Things have changed from a compliance perspective and everything else. And we really felt that there was a need. If a guy wants to go out and buy a combine and it's not part of his operating budget, or he needs something from a short-term perspective, there's not a lot of, options out there. And we just wanted to listen to our customers and our clients and provide them a service that there really wasn't available. And we're able to partner with a really good resource, because we don't know that much about financing, but we feel comfortable and confident from a market perspective, and also the people that we do business with, that there's good risk there, and there's good opportunity for everybody to make a win-win proposition out of it. So that's the only reason that it's there. It's not something that's going to be changing everything, but it just provides another opportunity. And interest rates continue the way they are. Farming gets a little bit tighter as time goes by. The last thing I want to do is have somebody that needs a piece of machinery not being able to do something because the banker said no.
Yeah. Okay. You talk about interest rates. Let's change our focus just a little bit, and let's talk about interest rates. So the Fed cut interest rates last month for the first time since March of 2020. Another possible cut could be seen this year, maybe a 0.5% according to some guesses by the end of the year, and maybe more cuts possible in 2025. Now, what would be some of the ramifications of that cut rate, the cut we did see in the rate, Max? It's all about trickling down, I guess. But when it comes to those interest rates, we've talked so much about how farmers may use that as a benchmark or a gauge or something to keep their sights on. What are you seeing along that spectrum?
Well, it's always been a leading indicator in terms of what's going to happen next. Interest rates would be second to commodity prices, and it's the cost of money. So it's the cost of borrowing, whether it's your operating note or your 20-year note on that half section of land that you're going to buy. So it's definitely a factor. What has it done to land prices? Not much up until recently. We really didn't feel like, and it's always kind of been a lagging indicator. That's one of those indicators that, especially with land, if commodity prices drop 60 cents, we do equipment auction the next day, we're going to feel that on that auction sale. Mm-hmm. If, the price of beans drops 40 cents, it might be 20 days and we still won't feel it. So there was a lagging indicator there, and we're starting to see that being priced into the land market. I would say in general, the land market peaked in December of 23, and has probably come off the tops 10 to 20%, depending on where you're at. But overall, there's still really good depth in the land market from a buyer's perspective. I think there's more bidders registering for our land auctions in the last 6 months than I've seen the prior 6 months to that. So that's reassuring. And the other thing that I think is going to keep these land prices up is rents. Rents are still really good. You're hearing about public rents in the Northern Valley, $300-400 on some of that beet and potato ground. So that's going to insulate us from any major market corrections, especially on the good stuff. But the outlook isn't very good for 2025 when you talk to the ag bankers and stuff. So we'll see what next spring brings.
Yeah, but there's anomalies everywhere, and you can make an argument here this summer, especially on tightly held areas where there's good farm activity and quality real estate. I would tell you there's statistics there that land has actually continued a little bit of a rise. Go figure that out.
Yeah.
The marginal stuff's always the first to change, as Max indicated. And we're seeing a little bit of that. It just, land has always been one of those things that when things change and it goes up really fast. But when on real estate, it takes forever to go down. So you got to remember, when did interest rates peak in 1982 at 16.5%?
Okay.
What was the bottom of the land market? 85. It takes that long for it to change.
Okay. The same was true in 13 to, land market last peaked in 12, 13, and didn't bottom until 16 or 17. So
then it rocketed right back up.
Yeah. Now, it seems like we're going to have another, I would say, a pretty good snapshot of land values coming up this fall, because I was looking at steffesgroup.com, and we've got land auctions closing in Cass County. We've got another one, Cheyenne, Wyoming, Jasper County, Iowa, some land out by Dickinson, Cass County, Fayette County, Iowa. I mean, several auctions coming up here this fall, Max.
We were counting in the office. I think there's 10,000 acres coming up between now and the 20th of November. And there's other auction companies out there. There's a lot of land that's trading hands this fall. And, that's typical to an election year in a time of transition that we're in right now. There's a lot of families, maybe they're 70 to 80 years old. They own the land with their brother and sister, and they don't want to ride the next wave. And they're seeing the writing on the wall that the tops are in. But there's still a wonderful opportunity to exit at a phenomenal price level, and they're taking advantage of that market that we're still in. Because there is still robust demand. Like Dad said earlier, there's way more buyers out there than there are sellers for farmland.
I got to tell you this because I've been around the longest. Tell me a time when land wasn't high. I mean, got to remember, when people came to North Dakota on the homestead, they got the land for free. How many of those? And half of them went broke. Couldn't make it. Well, we didn't have government subsidies then. We didn't have insurance and all those other kind of things. So, you always pay too much for land. That's just the way it goes. And, the scale has just changed. I'm going to imagine the guy that paid, $50 for a piece of ground, probably sought the same thing the guy that's paying $7,500. It's never about what the land is, you have to pay for it. It's about what you can afford to pay for it. It's kind of like the gold standard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes a big difference.
Well, you've been, you brought it up, Scott, but you've been around the longest in this room. Are you still having the same conversations over coffee and having a piece of pie at lunch? Some of the same conversations today. Have you had those before in the 80s when it comes to land values, when it comes to interest rates?
Yeah, when 8820 John Deere combines got to be $100,000, everybody freaked out. And guess what? Didn't take very long, and pretty soon they were selling them for $50 because the 80s happened. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, you buy an X9 combine or the new 9230. Is that the new Case IH? No, the AF11. They're going to be $1 million. Isn't that crazy? Meanwhile, they have about 4 times the capacity, or even more than that. Those big combines can do 5,000-6,000 bushels an hour. It's crazy. That's a harvest in a lot of areas.
Now, I want to ask you, since we're talking a little bit about equipment, I want to circle back to Canada. Is there much difference in maybe some of the colors of the equipment that we're selling up there?
More yellow.
Yeah.
A lot more New Holland up there. And then, boy, talk about air drills. They got air drills coming. They don't, not a lot of row crop planting up there simply because. So it's not uncommon for a guy to have 3 90-foot air drills. And it just different. Yeah. Seed Hawk, Bourgault. There's a few. I would say those are the 2 most popular ones up there. What else is there, Max? The Case IH ones are.
Yeah, Concords, Amenities. You're going to see some of those up there, but those 2 brands, I think, have the market cornered up there.
And Horsch, too, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question. Max and I had a recent guest in here talking about all these equipment auctions, dealer auctions specifically. What are some of your thoughts on that, Scott?
Well, it's happened before. It'll happen again. But you're right. We've sold more dealer equipment probably in the last year and a half than we have in the previous 5 years combined. And, I refer back, and guys that are listening and folks that are listening remember the 80s, and there used to be a dealer in every town, and pretty soon there wasn't. So there was a lot of dealer activity through the 80s and early 90s, and it's a little different now in the sense that it has more to do with the consolidated dealer groups that are much more aggressive in managing their inventories as compared to leaving a tractor sit on Main Street for 2 or 3 or 4 years till somebody comes around and buys it. There's too much capital, and they're a little bit more shrewd from a business perspective. They don't allow that to happen. So that's one of the reasons that we're seeing so much. And of course, it's just a cycle. It's the same thing. First of all, it was scarce, and now it's abundant. I got a C in economics, but I remember those 2 words.
Dad, do you think the next 2 months are going to be as busy as, like, say, the first 2 months of this year or first 6 months of this year in terms of dealership activity?
I would tell you the dealer work will probably continue through next spring, but then after that, probably change a little bit. And again, we did the same thing in after 13, so 14 and 15 was a lot of dealer activity, if you guys recall that. And pretty soon the inventory's dried up. As you sit right now, you got to look at what's happening. And the first generation used machinery that we're offering in the marketplace right now is selling at a discount as compared to its what would you say, its use? In other words, what it's already done. Mm-hmm. It'd be kind of like buying a pickup with 10,000 miles on it at a 25% discount. The first 10,000 miles are always the most expensive. So you're out there and looking for buys and opportunities. Hey, if the inventory is available and it works, you don't always have to buy new. There's great opportunities. And pretty soon, just like it happened before, you probably some of this late model machinery in 2 or 3 or 4 years probably be worth more than you paid for it this fall or next spring. You just got to make sure you can afford it. That's always the $2 question. So we see the machinery market flattening out. Probably a few more farm retirements in the state. What would you say? Activity in 2025. Because from a motivation perspective, if you don't have a successorship plan in place and you're 65 or 85 years old, right, and you don't have a son or a daughter, and you see, I got to buy $1 million combine or buy a $700,000 four-wheel drive, say, honey, maybe we ought to sell out and buy a house in Arizona. Yeah. A little bit of that going on.
Yeah. For folks who are familiar with Max being on the air 3 times a week talking about what's going on at Steffes Group.
Yeah, Dad retired from that gig.
You held that job for a long time, Scott.
When the day that Max was born at St. Luke's Hospital, I had a call-in with my friend Tom Wynn, who's no longer with us. What are you doing today? And I said, having a baby.
Yeah.
So that was 30-some years ago. Yeah, we started in the early 80s on KFGO. But the checks are still good too, Rusty. I know they haven't called us lately.
As far as I can tell.
Yeah.
I'm not in that department, but I hear good things.
We've been on KFGO a long time.
Well, I'm going to put you on the spot, Scott. We want you to keep on coming back.
Oh, really? Are the checks going to be the same?
I'm sure they will be.
Yeah, maybe I have to get you back next year sometime.
Yeah,
we'll let you back. Thanks for coming on, Dad.
Yeah.
And this will be podcast at kfgo.com. And thank you for coming in, Scott. Thank you for coming in, Max. We appreciate it.
You bet. We appreciate you, Rusty.
All right. Check it out. STEFFESgroup.com. I'm Rusty Halverson for the Mighty 790 and 104.7 KFGO.